It's the 4th day of August 2022. Hello everybody, I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org, and welcome to the pro-nuclear degenerate scumbag show. I don't know what to call it. Outside of a pro-nuclear degenerate scumbag show, because that's basically what it is. It's named itself. And I'm just confused how police don't shoot pro-nuclear on sight. They got guns, it's legal, it's supposed to protect us from the criminals. Makes sense to me anyway. Makes sense to you if you hang around here for a couple of shows, I tell you what. Hello, everyone. I kind of forgot that I'm a minute late. My apologies, because we're usually never late, never early. Nothing says scumbag like the IAEA, do they? Except for the Japan, I suppose. This video... this is why I was late, because I was sat here watching this. This is from March the 20th, 2011, which is 9 days after the tsunami. And
to help in the regions that have been affected.
He's from the Prime Minister's office.
The various events. And I wish to express my deep gratitude for all the help and support that we have received from these various countries and organizations.
だからこそ私どもはこの特に原発の問題に対して日本だけの問題にしてはいけないという認識を持っています。
I got no idea what's coming up.
And that is why all the more we consider that particularly regarding the issue of the nuclear power generation plant, we consider that we should not consider this merely an issue only for Japan.
原発を採用し
Did you catch that? You're like, this is not just a radioactive fallout problem for Japan. This is
ている
bad.
各国、そして近隣諸国をはじめ、世界的に
Entertain
も
yourselves for a
こ
second.
の今の日本の原発の問題というのは大変重要な課題であると私は考えております。
I consider that the issue of the nuclear power plant represents a very important issue and challenge for the various countries that have adopted nuclear power generation plants, as well as for our neighboring countries and the entire world.
だから
Yeah, and so I'm not going to walk you through. But generally, this is the radioactive fallout model from France, based on 16 days of venting, not based on the actual nuclear meltdowns. This is the same as similar models worldwide. If you lose your kitty, the best way to catch your kitten is wait till dark, typically. Yeah, and counterpunch. I see that one. Thank you. And who's sending me texts? Or do you want to... I don't know who that is. A lot of people will tell me who they are, but... if I knows them regularly, right? Small modular reactors... counterpunch is typically not going to be a reliable report. I'll check it out, though, after, for sure. What can I say? Fukushima 50. Oh, it's obsolete optics. I didn't know that. How come I didn't know that? You texted me before. A lot of people do that. I don't know who it is. They'll text me and talk to me, right? I'm going to put obsolete optics in so I know who it is. I thought I had you in there. Oh, there you go. Well. Okay, so like if you lose your cat, as Richard has done, what you do is if you feed your cat box food, go out and shake your box food every couple of minutes, just for a short shake. And if it's after dark, it almost works 100% of the time. And if you feed them out of a can, or if you cook their food, go out with a fork in a pot and ding it every few minutes. And they'll usually come running. The food is different, right? You can call them kitty, kitty, kitty all you want. When it comes to food, the cat don't give a crap if it's mad at you or not. I just phoned obsolete optics. Hang on, I'll fix that later. You can call in 709-589-4406. Thank you, Dana. It's probably one of the scariest pictures you're going to see. Is crops with nuclear power plants in the background. And the food constantly shipped out to the supermarkets to poison the children and elderly and the women. And the men too, of course. But the most vulnerable are the children and the women and the elderly. It's got to stop, right? We had an earthquake in Japan today. And it got a lot of attention everywhere but from Japan. There's only one Japan media reported on. Quite a few other medias reported on it. Which was really weird. That's really weird, actually. So, Japan has its own scale of 1 to 7. Not 7.1, 7.2, but 1 to 7. And so, let's go back and look quickly at a 2018 earthquake Japan had in Hokkaido, in the most northerly part of Japan, on an island. So they had homes were buried under a landslide. It was a 6.6 earthquake, 6.6, which most people don't consider that too. It's pretty bad, depending on where it's to, basically, but they still don't consider it too bad, right? But there was 22,000 people involved in the rescue effort. 22,000. But then it was a 6.6. I know, right? But hang on. So the 6.6 was on the Japanese scale of 7. And so you start, when you see all these landslides, it's kind of, I got better pictures, but you start noticing all the landslides, not just out in the fields, but in the mountain edges. So a 6.7 on Japan's scale of 7 is a 9.5. So a 9.5, you expect to see some real heavy landslides, right? You also expect to see, and this is one of the landslides, and you also expect to see devastation where the earth is pulled apart, and we see that. So when you see the landslides like that, that's considered up close. So when you zoom back and you see both sides of all the mountains have landslides. Have you ever seen that before? Now they're calling it a 6.6 even today, despite the fact it's on the Japanese scale. I've never seen that before in any earthquakes worldwide. So they tell you it's a 6.6. But a 6.6 don't do stuff like that, right? There was 130 aftershocks. A 6.6 doesn't have 130 aftershocks. But if that's a 9.5, then you expect it to look like this. And that. Oh, and this. And that. because a 6.6 on a Japanese scale is 9.5, and that's what you would expect out of a 9.5. Now, the Hokkaido Islands, they have a nuclear power plant. And this is where the X is where they had the earthquake. It was on land. It was on land probably right here. It's not very far from the nuclear power plant at all. But it's on land, and so it's very violent. So when Japan tells you they had a 5.6, you got to really start paying attention. You got to start investigating, because you can't trust Japan, period. Or Dutch sink, for instance, right? Who covers a lot of earthquake, but he's as fake as he gets. Oh, well, hang on, I'll play a clip for you in case you don't understand Dutch. Such a despicable person. When I exposed him, he had 3 major sponsors for his YouTube channel. They all dumped him. Yeah. Such a scammer, this guy. His dad was heavily involved in the military.
I'm not joking. They took the radioactive debris from Fukushima the day after the tsunami hit, and they had it all ready to go. The 60 years worth of stored radioactive fuel, they had it all ready to go on pallets.
Now he's reading a script on a screen that somebody else wrote.
The reactor was already shut down in maintenance mode when the earthquake hit. Then the tsunami came in, and Fukushima sits about 30 to 40 feet up off the ocean, up on a big mound. And so the wave that came in was only 30 to 40 feet high at the most, so it only got a couple feet of water that came in. They faked the damage, took the debris, the 60 years worth of stored radioactive debris, took it quickly, had to have buried it in the ground somewhere nearby, not far away, I mean, in the same region most likely, and buried it in a casket of, buried the waste in the casket of tsunami debris, and then blow up the thing 2 days later, 3 days later, and sprinkle some radium around so you get a radioactive debris, slight detection, kind of heavy, making the Geiger counters click around the plant itself, and then everything goes away within a few years. No.
Wow. First off, they faked the damage, he said. Does that look like it was fake to you? He said they only got maybe 2 feet of water. Does that look like 2 feet of water? That's Fukushima nuclear plant, by the way. He said they had it already on pallets. You don't put fuel on pallets. First off. And just say you had the massive trucks they use only travel at 3 or 4 miles per hour, because you're talking about 100 plus tons. 680 kilometers of coastline looked like that.
Radiation reaches the shores of the United States. No radiation detected. I drove all the way across the country taking readings. And
yeah, now he took donations and readings and drove across America with his Geiger counters and said there was no radioactive fallout whatsoever. It's absurd. The whole story is just absurd.
Of course, here we are. I still can take readings, and it's still incredibly low. It's below what we would consider normal range.
So when you have a nuclear accident, there's less radiation in the environment than it was before the accident. Did you know that?
Normal range being 30 to 40 clicks per minute. So that being said,
normal range wasn't 30 or 40 clicks per minute, by the way. It was 8 or 9.
The fish is fine. And I've already done tests on the
Look at the normal range up there. 180 is an evacuation site at Fukushima in the first year, they said.
Fish too. So the whole Fukushima thing's a scam, guys. They took that.
The whole thing was a scam.
This is what I've got on the inside. Look at that. Port-locked wild smoked salmon. Now, before anybody says anything about Fukushima, don't even talk to me about Fukushima. I've got the Geiger counters.
Yeah, he's a despicable person. The current one down there, their claim was... this was really... It's only been about 4 years they started doing this, where they give you latitude and longitude. And sometimes they'll give you the depth, but they won't tell you how far off the coastline. That's extremely rare. If you have 30 medias reported, one of them will do the math, basically, and give you a rough estimate of the coastline. But about 4 years ago, they would tell you how far off the city, whichever community it was, and how deep down it was. They stopped doing that about 4 years ago. So Japan's nuclear watchdog, the non-regulatory agencies, always come out immediately and say there's no abnormalities at the nuclear power plants. No matter where they have an earthquake, if there's a nuclear power plant within 1,000 miles, they'll come out and say that. It's probably some kind of law or something, right? Because the industry is as paranoid as they get. And so they claim Fukushima resulting in the world's worst nuclear crisis since Chernobyl. This is an unbelievable way to describe it, first off. Because typically they're going to say Chernobyl is the world's worst nuclear disaster, which lost around 9 tons. Each Japan reactors were 720 tons. Chernobyl was mostly graphite. Fukushima's were pure uranium plutonium reactors. It's completely different. And each reactor core was around 720 tons. And at the top of each of the buildings were decades of reactor cores. Chernobyl was a brand new reactor, it was just 2 years old. So there's a lot of, it was surprising, there was a lot of reports, which usually indicates it's a significant earthquake. None of them mentioned whether it was the Japanese scale, which was really interesting, because we've never seen that before. So this one actually told you it was 39 miles off east-northeast of Nami, which is supposed to be abandoned because it's such a radioactive wasteland, and they're shipping food to America and Canada, United Kingdom, and many other countries from there. And occurred at a depth of 27, very shallow earthquake, 27 miles. But that's in line, that's fairly close to the 2011 earthquake. Shaking was probably, because normally they'll give you a graphics of the shaking. In different prefectures, they didn't. They're expecting more aftershocks, so, and we predicted this a little while back, they would just go silent on future earthquakes. So, because Miyagi, Fukushima, Tochigi, Ibaraki, Niigata are all, right? If you're getting shaking all of those, and Fukushima, of course, Fukushima is the center of all of that. Earthquake is off Fukushima's coastline itself. It can't shake them without going past the fragile, melted reactor buildings. So the problem is you're worried that the fragile reactor buildings that have multiple meltdowns are that could cause a chain reaction, right? This is what you're worried about. And that releases a radioactive plume. And the radioactive plumes are very quick at covering the planet in radioactive fallout. And this one is March the 28th. So it's less than 3 weeks this covers the planet typically. Official may temporarily shut down transportation infrastructures. Now, I've never heard them do this before, where they're not saying they shut it down, where they're probably going to do this, they're probably going to do that, they've probably done this. And we cover this all the time for over a decade. We've never heard them phrase the narrative this way. Utility outages are possible, particularly near the earthquake's epicenter. Out of an abundance of caution, consider vacating multi-story buildings where shaking occurs until authorities confirm their structural integrity. Monitor and plan for aftershocks. Now, you do hear this when there's a big earthquake. This is the narrative you would hear. And then the rest of the reports were really, really vague. There's not yet been any reports of significant injuries or damage. China reported on an extremely vague at a depth of 60 kilometers, 27 miles. So when you see a 1 minute read, that's a pretty vague story, right? Nuclear power is on the brink of $1 trillion resurgence, but one accident anywhere could stop the momentum. Or if the truth comes out about Fukushima, or Santa Susana, which was equal to 463-mile islands melting down at the same time. Demand for advanced nuclear reactors that don't exist. So all this story basically is doing is trying to build up hype. We'll be worried about $1 trillion globally, according to the Secretary in the Department of Energy, United States. This is madness to suggest that something that doesn't even exist. The IE, International Atomic Energy Agency, the non-regulatory agencies, have moved quite fast from almost an intruder into a very welcomed participant in this dialogue about decarbonizing the energy grid, said demonic sadistic demon Rafael Grossi, the Dick General of the Scumbag United Nations Military Industrial Complexes, New World Order, International Atomic Energy Agency. These are biological weapons. That's what a nuclear power plant is. It's hemorrhaging radiation into your environment. Zero tolerance for this industry. And because these are monsters. But that momentum depends on international cooperation around safety and best practices. The issue is how nuclear industry works and perceived. It's the amount of propaganda. We do a 24-hour news cycle of the news, typically. And you probably get 100 stories every day. I can't tell 100 stories. I can read 100 stories almost, but I can't tell 100 stories because that takes 5 or 6 hours. Because generally what I do is I'll pick the best stories of the day and I'll tell those stories. I'll read everything else, of course, but and I mean, I'll read everything else. I read until I sleep. I wake up, I start reading this stuff, and I go to sleep. And listening to it and reading it. It's we got a handle on it now for sure. We got their number. They're a despicable industry. The issues how nuclear industry works. These are just incredible goblins. And it's perceived, which is the entire legacy, every facet of nuclear is predicated upon deception, by the way. And any accident anywhere is an accident everywhere. These are constant accidents. I don't call these things disease factories because I'm bored. I don't work all day, every day just because I'm bored. I work at it because these are extinction event machines. These are perpetual lawyers on top of that. Nuclear energy has an inflection point. It's at desperation point. We've been talking about this a lot the last couple of weeks in particular. This industry is in desperation mode. Well, what I refer to as drowning man mode. It'll take down everything with it because it knows it's going down. Its potential was undercut by a series of devastating and dangerous accidents. Well, its potential is to exterminate all species just from the emissions from the fuel pools worldwide. And there's a shocking amount of them. So the fuel comes out of the reactor, it goes in the fuel pool. It's still splitting the atom. That's released into the environment all day. There's no containment around the fuel pools. And they're surrounded by farms on top of that. That's evilness in overdrive, by the way. That's unbelievably evil. That's evil on a whole different scale to build these things in farmland. Now, we had a troll here the other night who was claiming that nuclear runs on its own power. It doesn't. It runs on two external full-time power supplies, gas, oil, or coal. The same plants are running huge cities. You need two of them to run a nuclear power plant site. To build it, to run it, and 60 years to decommission it. Dedicated to it. And they were trying to claim in the comments section, I noticed after the show, that it goes out in the grid and then it comes back and then it runs on itself like a perpetual machine. That's an absolute lie. That's an unequivocal lie. It does not do that. And the people that done that, I deeply disrespect you for doing that. Thanks to new technology and increasingly urgent need to fight climate change, which is caused by almost 80 years of emissions into the environment from not gas, oil, and coal plants, because they don't make plumes that covers the planet. This plume, by the way, only took 20 days. You can imagine what happens 10 days later. The plume never goes away. It pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. Gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas don't mix with each other. And so what I mean by that is they pulse energy in every direction, like how the sun radiates heat. The atom pulses energy, and the energy is traveling at the speed of light, just shy of the speed of light. So it blasts through your DNA and your chromosomes and all the species too. When they hit gammas and X-rays and neutrons and betas, emissions hit each other, they change direction. And that's known as a braking effect. It doesn't slow down, it changes direction. That creates an X-ray. So you got gamma, alpha, neutrons, betas, and X-ray. And the X-rays will sterilize everything in your forest where this stuff is hanging out, and in your meadows. And remember, Earth doesn't have that much land. It's mostly ocean. Everything is precious. Well, it needs its own external power because it needs its own external power. That's just how... Because nuclear has to go through a big conversion before it goes out into the grid. They can't feed it back into the grid, apparently. And that's the fact. Nuclear energy is getting a second shot at becoming a prominent part of the global... A second shot. This is bizarreness, of course. This is the lobbying groups, nuclear lobbyists, write these stories. And the media publishes, and that's how they make their money. Claiming that nuclear energy does not create any of the dangerous gas emissions. And of course, right, they shoot right to greenhouse gas and climate change in the same mouthful. Well, climate change is caused by radiation pulsing energy every second. It's not caused by something static like carbon. Carbon is sucked up by the plants and the trees and the animals and the biotas. You can't. If you got no carbon, the planet would be a barren wasteland. There'd be no species here whatsoever. This is the game they've been playing on you for almost 80 years. This is not. This is not normal for these people. The word honest doesn't exist in their vocabulary anywhere. It creates absurd emissions through the fuel pools all day, every day, for decades after the plant is closed on top of that. And the amount of emissions we're talking about is stunning. It's stunning. Because the fuel that would normally power 1 million homes by splitting atoms is no longer boiling water, but it's still splitting the atoms. It's in pools, and the atoms are saturated, are absorbed by the water. The water evaporates about 120,000 liters out of each and every pool, and there's over 1,000 of them worldwide each day. And each liter would be billions or trillions of atoms, man-made anthropogenic atoms, that are a danger to everything with replicating cells. So most people only think of humans for some reason. I don't understand it. But that's how most people think, right? You got to think about all the species, and they're extremely vulnerable to this stuff. Well, everything is. Nothing is safe from this stuff. There is no safe from this stuff. A panel discussion at the military-industrial complex, also known as United Nations, on Tuesday. A collection of nuclear energy scum from around the world gathered to discuss the scope of the renaissance. There is no renaissance. They closed down 40 reactors in the last few years. They're going to close down another dozen or two in the next couple of years. There's no renaissance. It's absurd to suggest there is. Why it's so critical industry works together to ensure gold standard safety measures are adopted everywhere. So they're putting out the word, right, that if you have an accident, don't say nothing. Like they have sirens around nuclear power plants, which should scare the living daylights out of you. And up to 10 miles away, they'll have up over 100 to 120 sirens. And the idea, they were put there by activists who pushed for the legislation, not by the industry, not out of good faith or anything. The industry has no good faith whatsoever. And they'll never use the sirens around a nuclear power plant for an accident. It'll never happen. It'll burn right to the ground. They won't set off the sirens. A nuclear accident anywhere has the potential to upset the most major momentum the industry has had in decades. And of course, this push you've seen has been going since February, when Russia settled down at Chernobyl, and the world started saying, well, what's going on? Is there going to be a release? And there was a massive tens of thousands of public relation firms, you call them medias, they're public relation firms, worldwide, launched a counter and promoted nuclear instead of being worried about nuclear. In the last couple of weeks, Russia's sitting at a nuclear power plant, firing weapons from a nuclear power plant. If you knock out power 50 miles away that's headed to the nuclear power plant generators have to start up or it'll melt down. But the generators work on external power too. %50 of it is no carbon emission power. Like, carbon's awesome. You can't have a planet without carbon. But nuclear is not emission free. Because this is how they use the word emission and carbon in the same sentence, right? Nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging emissions. First off, they're boiling 1 million gallons of water a minute. That's 4,500 tons a minute. Each glass of water would typically have 1 billion creatures in it, and eggs and larvae and everything else. So 16 million times 1 billion creatures per minute is boiled is boiled into the environment. So that's releasing a lot of methane and everything else, blah, 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 blah. But it's killing all the eggs and larvae and small fries. And it's killing them on a level that is stunning, by the way. Nuclear is just, and it's a disease factor. It's hemorrhaging radiation. And that attacks all 8 million species, not just humans. They keep talking about Bill Gates. Why do people keep doing that? They don't have anybody else out there, see? They keep bringing up Bill Gates. As an example, the advanced nuclear reactor that Bill Gates, nuclear innovation company, is installing in a former coal town. Like, this is absurd, that it's like having a pet rock and going around and asking everybody to pet it, really. The reactors they're talking about don't exist, Terra Nova. They don't exist. It doesn't exist. It might never exist, the reactors they're talking about. And if you took geothermal, if you dug under any coal, gas, oil, nuclear plant, you'll hit geothermal. That's a fact. You can get rid of the gas, oil, and coal and tap into the geothermal. So, like, the industry is insane. Look at them. They're harvesting food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. Do you think that's normal? Company aims to power the world for millions of years by digging the deepest holes. They're just going to dig down, tap into the geothermal, whereas get down to 930 degree temperatures. So if you do that under gas, oil, coal, nuclear plants, you can get rid of the gas, oil, coal, and nuclear and just run it on geothermal. It's actually hotter than the gas, oil, and coal and nuclear is. The change in sediment surrounding nuclear energies happened quickly, said Monster Raphael Grossi. Some pictures from Chernobyl, wild abandoned dogs. Just a few years ago, nuclear would not be present, perhaps not even welcomed, at the annual Conference of Parties, which again is the military-industrial complex, United Nations, what George Bush Sr. calls the New World Order, and provides an opportunity for global leaders to discuss climate change. Well, first, global leaders are not supposed to be meeting like this. And their version of climate change got nothing to do with the real version of it, which is caused by nuclear. Last year, they started on Halloween and ended on the 13th of November. And I've done a show every day based upon the headlines from their conferences for 13 days. And we dissected their narratives. And the IAEA's moved quite fast from almost an intruder to a very welcome participant. The IAEA is one of the biggest bullies on the planet. They are United Nations, same as Conference of Parties is United Nations, same as the World Health Organization is United Nations, same as UNICEF is United Nations, same as the IMF is all ran by people from United Nations. The same countries, 190 countries for the International Monetary Fund, they're all UN countries, which is, George Bush again calls it the New World Order, the military-industrial complex, because it's 195 militaries. The next Constipated Party conference will be in Egypt in November, and we're going to come out and curb stomp them if we catch them lying. Like, this is what we do. We go through the news cycle. If they lie, we challenge the lie. We point out the lie. The IAEA is planning to be part of both of these conferences, aka United Nations. You can't separate them. The mere fact we're talking about a constipated party with nuclear in Egypt and the Gulf in and by itself is telling you a lot of what is happening, and we are changing in the possibilities we have that could have almost unforeseeable just a few years ago, said despicable puppy raping Grossi. The issue of how nuclear industry works and perceived globally, any accident anywhere is an accident everywhere. They're not supposed. These people are not supposed to exist, particularly in this capacity, by the way. They don't have sovereignty over any country. They have 195 traders that work from countries, committing sedition in order to conspire with a corporation known as United Nations. South Africa has 2 reactors, according to the World Nuclear Association. They're both on fault lines. They're both decrepit. They're both brittle. The metal has been bombarded with neutrons for decades, way past their lifespans. And then the World Nuclear Association is a pro-nuclear lobbying group. That's not documentation or information. That's a lobbying group. That's a bigoted and biased and prejudiced and racist organization. Nuclear is a critical base load to wind, solar, and geothermal in the continent. We hear this quite a lot, right? Nuclear is not green, clean, too cheap to meter, or carbon-free, emission-free, or anything else. It's the most carbon-intensive, resource-intensive, monetary resource-intensive, manpower resource-intensive, and polluting industry in human history. Telling the same lie over and over doesn't make it true. And that's what they do. The public, especially the public, has to have confidence that the nuclear energy plant is safe, said Scumbag Grossi. Now, Grossi said, if you finish with me, I'm going to go back to raping puppies. The moment is serious. We know it is red alert for planet Earth, said Degenerate, human trash, Grossi. Oh, yeah. How long did our video get extended last night, I wonder? 12 hours later, my videos get longer. Exactly 12 hours. Not 11 hours and 59 minutes and 59 seconds. And it's not 12 hours and 1 second, but 12 hours. My videos magically get longer. We got a poll tonight. Hello, poll. Should it be illegal for the pro-nuclear, despicable degenerates to have children? I think it should be. So the video last night was 2 hours, 28 minutes, 51 seconds after. Which means it's 7 seconds longer again. So lately, each video is exactly 7 seconds longer, except for one was like 15 seconds longer. But that's multiple nights in a row. It's exactly 7 seconds longer. Exactly. It's very concerning. It's obviously they're putting something in my video, right? They're putting in programs or software into my video. WNBA star Brittany Griner is sentenced to 9 years in a Russian prison for having a gram of hash oil that she's legally allowed to have in the United States with her. What a stupid country, right? Really? Really? You're going to put someone in jail for having a gram of pot? What are you going to do? Go out and eat all the hamburgers in your country when you get high? What an idiot country, man. What a pointless country. Looks like I missed a headline on this story. That's okay. There's lots of headlines. Fukushima starts build to release treated radioactive wastewater. This is another reason you should hate the nuclear industry. You can't treat, it's not wastewater, it's radioactive water. It's a dirty bomb. If I got a dirty bomb, you're not going to call it wastewater. It's not treated because the filter is so radioactive, you can't get near it to change it once you start it. You're talking about 2.2 sieverts per hour. Water that was used to cool the highly radioactive reactor cores. They said they're going to filter that, and then this is absurdness. The whole story, they had 1,000 tanks in 2013. You can check my playlist of the entire presentations on it. Stored in 1,000 tanks. They got 1,000 tanks in 2013 and 1,000 tanks in 2022. So if you subtract 1,000 from 2013 from what they got today, which is 1,000, they filled up how many tanks in the last 9 years? TEPCO is not even a decommissioning authority. They blame TEPCO so you don't blame the nuclear industry, see? And the government has obtained approval from the heads of the plant's host town, which is Fukushima and Okuma. These are ghost towns. These are nuclear wastelands 2 kilometers away from a nuclear wasteland. They got approval from 2 nuclear wastelands. Like from the mayors of 2 ghost towns. Nuclear ghost towns. Nuclears can't open its mouth without lying, and they're vicious, deadly lies. James Lewis says you should fill basketballs with nuclear waste. Because that'll make it pretty interesting, because they won't want to hang on to the ball. Which, I agree with him. It's hilarious. Are they putting tracking codes in my videos? I think you're asked. Yeah. Hi, Angel's Place. Chelsea. Albert. Is Dale P here tonight? Because I don't know if Dale noticed, but I only got about 30 people who watches my videos. If he chases anybody away, I won't have anybody watching my videos. The people that are here in the comments section are not bad people. They're here, they're good people. You can't chase them away. I won't have anybody hanging around my video. It's frustrating. And people lash out, but don't lash out at the people that are supporting me. Because you're just destroying me by doing that. And they were doing that to Colette S, right? They were attacking her. And so she basically doesn't go in the comment very often after that, and then rarely, right? And there's quite a few people that's been done to, where people come in and try to ridicule them or something, because a lot of people are trying to do the moral and ethical thing, but they don't take abuse very good, and I can't blame them. I don't expect people to have a thick skin like I got. If you went out and seen the die-offs on the research expeditions like I did, you'd be like me. You would have a pretty thick skin, folks. TEPCO and the government has obtained approval from 2 nuclear wasteland ghost towns mayors that don't live there. Nuclear got the credibility of a serial killer. IAEA experts visited the plant earlier that year. They don't have a permanent person stationed at Fukushima, believe it or not. They do have working power plants, though, but not at Fukushima. Fukushima starts build a release to treat the water. The tanks are empty. The tanks were built to trick you into thinking they're not going to pollute the Pacific Ocean. But see, because the crews are changing all the time, management is changing all the time. You can't keep everybody in the loop all the time, so you got to get rid of the tanks because you can't keep everybody in the loops. Because someone is going to say, "Hey, the tanks are empty." If the tanks are full, it's just normal water. If you fill up one of these tanks at 2.2 sieverts an hour of just beta, which they acknowledge, you're talking 1.4 million sieverts, for God's sakes. You can't get back on the site. If you fill up all the tanks, you can't get anywhere near Fukushima. It's absurd to suggest the tanks are full. It's absurd to suggest that that's all the water that they used. Like they're saying they're pumping up 150 tons a day. That's equal to a garden hose split 4 ways. It's like you got somebody permanently stood up pissing on each reactor all day long. It's the same thing. I know the truth doesn't matter, but that's the truth. Here you see it in this media too, right? TEPCO, which is a non-regulatory agency, doesn't, and the government, which is absurd. What do you mean the government? Give us names, scumbags. Have obtained approval from the heads of the host towns, Fukushima and Akuma. Fukushima and Akuma are on each side of the nuclear power plant, have been abandoned because they're incredibly radioactive. They're right by the nuclear meltdown, within 2 kilometers of it. So getting permission from a ghost town is like going up to the fucking graveyard and getting permission from somebody dead at the graveyard. When I went to the graveyard, he said it's okay. You know, say somebody dies, and bless their hearts, and somebody shows up at the will and says, "Hey, I was up to the graveyard, and they said that I should get the house." And they're like, "Who are you?" "Well, it doesn't matter. I was up to the graveyard. I got permission. That house is mine." That's what TEPCO's doing to you, right? Japan's a scumbag society. Construction of Fukushima water release facilities began Thursday. So this week there's been a big push on this narrative, right? Well, if you go down in the comments section of that, you can see the propaganda extends all the way down there. Will they give discounted Fukushima farm and agricultural products after that? Next guy's, I hope so. I prefer to have farm products from a nuclear wasteland than crap from a foreign country. It's hard to believe somebody actually said that, but there it is. Well, once it's all removed, people have short memories, which is 100% true. They don't even remember it today, for goodness sakes. The question remains, what else could they do with the huge amount of radioactive water? To release it slowly into the ocean seems to be the only realistic solution. Why? To really, hey, let's dump everything we got into the ocean. Let's get rid of everything and just dump all of our junk into the friggin' ocean. Who's yelling at me now? I don't know. Do you want to boil it off into the environment like they did at 3 Mile Island when everybody stopped looking? Boycott Japan. See, finally somebody got it right. An evaporation chamber is one solution. Evaporate the radioactive dirty bombs into the environment. That's what I mean. The police should have to go shoot people like that on sight. Get on with it already. The scientific consensus, there's no danger from the limited release of tritium, which occurs naturally. Actually, natural tritium is extremely rare on the planet, you despicable, disgusting, parasitic little scum. Whoever wrote that up there. Nothing says scumbag like nuclear, I tell you what. Naturally occurring tritium is extremely rare on Earth. The atmosphere is only trace amounts. What we're talking about is man-made radiation. You can't decontaminate water. It can't be done. Like, we're talking lethal doses by the gallon. If there was a gallon outside the studio, I'd be dead before I got this far in the video. So if you put that through a filter, the filter is so radioactive you can never get near it again. And they're going to pretend that they're changing filters once in a while, but even that is construction begins on a discharge facility. TEPCO, which is nationalized, doesn't even exist anymore. To discharge into the sea to contaminated water that has been filtered twice. Again, right, this is ludicrous to suggest that they're filtering it. Filtered twice. After a few hours, if you just put pure water through the filter, the water coming out the other side is going to be dozens of sieverts per liter. Because that's how it works in nuclear. We're to watch and stream Fukushima 50. I guess we're going to have to do a show on debunk Fukushima 50. Because that's a propaganda hit piece, right? That's just pure propaganda. That's meant to make people stupid. And it's cooked up by the nuclear industry on top of that, so you can imagine that's going to be revolting. Whoever gets the job to debunk that, that's going to be a disgusting job, because you got to listen to constant lies every few seconds. And guess who's going to get the job for it? I'm looking forward to shitting down there. The workers at the Fukushima Daiichi facility in Japan risked their lives and stayed at the nuclear power plant. That's simply not true. The helicopters couldn't even go near it. Dump water on it. If you go to my playlist, you'll see where TEPCO released 1,900 pictures. And it took 6 videos to flush out all the pictures with the dates of the pictures. The place was destroyed in 4 days. Everything had detonated. See, I don't like rushing anything, because the truth doesn't. The truth shouldn't be rushed. What am I dealing with here? Hang on. Hang on. This is Reactor 1 exploding. That's Reactor 1, by the way. It had decades of reactor cores stored at the top of the building. Do that again. Watch the detonation. I'm going to split it there, slow it down for you. There's nobody else on the planet that's going to do that for you. I'm going to slow it down to 25% speed. 1/4. So wait, you'll see the explosion. Remember, each of those buildings you're looking at are 190 feet tall. Okay. Now I'm going to show you Reactor 3 detonating. Here's number 3 going to detonate. And remember the building, white buildings, bluish white buildings you see there are 190 feet high. That's the fuel pool in the reactor core you see falling down. It's the remains of Reactor 3. Let me see if I can find an appropriate picture of Reactor 3 for you. Well, here's what it looked like after the explosion coming up. Now remember, the fuel pools are supposed to be at the top of the buildings. Those 2 red depictions you see up there, to the right, that's the fuel pools. Decades of reactor cores. They're completely gone, right? But they used cranes, remote control cranes, and homeless. And this is what remained of it. Of a 190-foot building. So there's nothing remaining. There's nothing there. Because, it blew up. And what this explosion means is fuel rods are going to be ejected all over that site. Fuel pellets and everything else, right? It didn't just blow up once. Multiple reactors blew up there. Authorities expanding evacuation orders. The latest news we had posted in the comments section earlier was 540,000 people because of heavy rains in Japan. Severe weather evacuated. Now, they picked up 30 to 60 million one-ton bags and 3% of the land. So if they picked up, let's just say 30 million one-ton bags and 3% of the land, then the other 97% is how many bags would you need? And every time it rains, which is the forests and mountains, every time it rains, that washes the radiation and the radioactive pollen and everything else and the radioactive litter down into the lower area, which is the farmland. At least 92 homes were damaged as of this morning in that headline. Major flooding. This is priceless, eh? New technology can help combat climate crisis. Like, the industry is insane, right? Scientists, a.k.a. scumbags, esteemed scumbags, a.k.a. academics. There's been an increase in electricity generation from the renewable sources like wind and solar, but they're intermittent in nature. So come up with a solution, asshole. Excuse the language. Getting a little ahead of myself tonight. Sorry about that. To fill the gap when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. Yeah, we heard you the first time. All the time. They've been doing this argument for 60 years, by the way. But if you came up with a solution, would it work? Yeah. Well, why not come up with a solution? Because we want nuclear. They don't want anything that competes with nuclear. That's the rule of the nuclear industry. Get rid of everything that competes with nuclear. They're a revolting lot, ain't they? They really are. There's really something extremely self-centered on top of that. But they're incredibly evil because they know how damaging this is to all the species. So you can, first off, you would use geothermal and tidal energy as base load energy. They run 24 hours a day. They don't care about the weather. You back it up with wind and solar, and you can back that up with pond batteries, where you got 2 ponds. You pump water to the top one with spare energy, and it runs down when you need it to the next pond. Or you can use compressed air storage, where you dig mine shafts or tunnels, and you compress air in there. And then the heat from the compression can be stored in salt for up to 2 or 3 weeks or in sand for up to 18 months. And we need technology that can create storable fuels and sustainable chemicals. Again, right, there's many options, but they won't even acknowledge it. The project was funded by major institutions in the United Kingdom, England, and Northumbria University. Which is like, this is such a strange. There's so many solutions out there, but they won't use them because they work, right? You can't get money for something that works. Working on projects with all kinds of institutions. The minute you see the University of Cambridge, then you might as well throw it all out the book anyway. Recent soaring gas prices in the United Kingdom. Because of the outbreak and civil wars in the Middle East. And the threats of a nuclear meltdown in Fukushima, Japan. The threats of a nuclear meltdown. What, you think it never happened or something? How do these people even tie their own shoes, I wonder? It's designed to inspire budding scumbag scientists to design and develop new technologies for sustainable energy. Well, why would you ignore the best technology like storage that exists? Why would you do that for? It's great technology, what you're talking about. But why would you ignore storage? Why would you demonize wind and solar when it's actually the cheapest form of energy available, and that if you utilize the storage that's available to it, you could solve the problem? Why would you do that? You're not stupid. To fill the gap when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't. I'm ashamed of these people that they use that excuse all the time. That's what your university does. They're extremely good at it. And they do it constantly, all day, every day. Speaking of the crazies, Barnaby Joyce demands Australia to invest in nuclear energy now. This is the strangest. What a bunch of lies this guy told. From Australia. Australia has a lot of pro-nuclear, despite the fact they have a ban on nuclear. They have an absurd amount of lunatic, vicious pro-nuclear in the government. Their government is completely infested with a parasite known as pro-nuclear. And the only solution to that is you got to stop them from having kids. Should it be illegal for pro-nuclear scumbags to have kids? Well, if it was legal 50 years ago, you wouldn't have the problems we got today because we wouldn't have the inbreeding, right? This is such a crazy story, folks. He joined other opposition. Now, he was in power for 9 years, that party was, and they didn't try to overturn the nuclear ban. Now they're out of power, they want to overturn the nuclear ban. He joins other opposition politicians in calling for nuclear energy in a no-go zone. Australia is under the Howard-era moratorium on the use of degenerate nuclear power. Right, John Howard had, in 1999, I think it was, had put it in legislation that you can't even have that debate in politics because it's such an evil industry. They already settled it back in 1999. But the nuclear industry is desperate for somebody to say, I like nuclear. And the people that do are always bizarre creeps. The current and previous prime ministers were reluctant to lift the ban. They got to have a referendum, actually. Australia could become a dumb country. Australia is a dumb country. No offense, but I mean, seriously. You got endless amount of places for solar, deserts. You got the best spot in the world for battery ponds, pond batteries, where you create dams in the mountains and you pump your water, fill up your two ponds, or you fill up your top pond, and then when you got no electricity, you let the water down into your bottom pond. And extra energy, you pump it back up into your big pond or your reservoir, whatever you want to call it. But you got the best spot in the world for tidal energy, too. You got a whole continent to yourself. And you're destroying your country because you refuse to do the right thing and you try to do the impossible like nuclear. I love the people. They're fantastic people. The politicians are batshit lunatics. They really are. I mean, they stand... There's a lot of lunatics on this planet. But the Australian politicians, the pro-nuclear community, they're weirdos. They should be banned from living next to schools. If you want to get zero emissions, listen to what they're doing in the UK. Well, you can't do something on your own. You can't get zero emission for millions of people, by the way. They're building new reactors. They're not building reactors. France might build reactors, but France can't even take care of the reactors they got. Who's going to build it in Australia? Is Australians actually going to build a reactor? Give me a break. Listen to what they're doing in France. France is down to 30%. It's falling apart. It's importing energy from everywhere, from countries that don't have it. How can you use France? Good God, man. Go back to bed and get up again and try again. Listen to what they're doing in Asia. Really? Asia's not building any reactors. Russia's planning on building some. They're going to pay for it. They're going to supply the manpower. They're going to supply the fuel. They're going to train people for 10 years. When there's endless amounts of other resources available that are much more applicable. Even Japan, where they talk about Fukushima, they're building more nuclear reactors. They're not building more nuclear reactors in Japan. Can you tell any more lies in this one story? America's building more. The Vole plant went from 14 billion to over 30 billion in price alone. It bankrupted Westinghouse, for God's sakes. That's the weirdo there. Are we once more going to leave ourselves in the previous centuries? The whole world moves on with technology and jobs and with all that is before them in a new opening industry of small nuclear energy reactors that don't exist. Barely exist on paper. Take you 10 years to get one up and build it. Got to get the kinks out of it. Got to re-engineer it. Then you got to build a new one with all the new engineering. And by that time, the renewable industry has already conquered the planet. Between 2020 and 2026, they're going to have around 4,800 gigawatts of renewables online. To put that into context, that's equal to 5,500 large nuclear power plants worth of renewable energies. That's more energy than all gas, oil, and coal and nuclear combined currently on the planet. Do you really think it's going to slow down after 2026? It's the desperation of an idiot industry, see? And Australia is the worst. Really, Australia is the media. There's no opposition media in Australia anywhere. Every time I see media, Australia media, just groan. I got no choice but to read it, but it's like, oh my God. Another disaster. Labour Industry Minister snubbed Joyce's call, suggesting his plans were vague and questioned why the nuclear push was coming after the party spent years in power and was no longer in power. Now that they are no care, no responsibility in opposition, they want to be able to lean towards one of the most expensive forms of power that will take too long to come online. It's excellent assessments. Mr. Joyce, people want to live near nuclear reactors if they were offered free electricity. There is 6 times more breast cancer within 15 miles of a nuclear power plant. The sex ratio within 50 miles of any nuclear power plant is more males than females, which means less reproduction, which means everybody had to be poisoned for that to happen, and you can't do that without the same attributes to all the species. Mr. Joyce was asked how he would address concerns regarding nuclear waste disposal. He said proper studies would be conducted to ensure the toxic material was thrown away properly. That's about the only thing that cheered me up all day, actually. He also claimed residents of towns would prefer to live near disease factories known as nuclear reactors rather than wind and solar farm setups. Well, just don't put them in your town, stupid. Nikola Tesla gave you the ability to transmit electricity 100 years ago. Why not use it? Independent MP Zali, I'm going to butcher your name, my apologies, Steckel, was involved in an inquiry into whether the moratorium on nuclear power should be lifted, said they had found there was no case for it. So I think the coalition at the moment are making themselves irrelevant. That would be too cool, would it? It's the Prime Minister of Australia. I can't tell the difference from the last one, can you? You gotta come out, like, if you're gonna be a leader, be a leader. It's not hard to do. You just gotta be a leader. Don't ask the lobbyists what to say. Nuclear energy is best for North Carolina, the Carolina Journal. Major media in Carolina. As global warming heats up, so they didn't write these articles. Zero possibility any of these people wrote the article. These are lobbyists, right? The last one now, that was written by anti-nuclear lobbyists. North Carolina needs to go nuclear. Recent state legislation requires Duke Energy, again, to use carbon emissions. So you get rid of carbon, you got no plants, no animals, no insects, no humans on the planet. Nuclear will be the best alternative for clean, reliable, and affordable energy, said the nuclear lobbyists. Cut dioxide emissions by 70% from Duke power plant. From Duke! Have you told Duke this shit? Because they'll get rid of you pretty quick in the next 8 years. Duke is like a government on their own. Claiming nuclear is the clean, emission-free technology is absurdness. It's the most It's the most resource-intensive industry in human history, bar nothing. Its emissions are probably equal to all emissions combined, plus it's radioactive. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging it, invisible snowstorms into your community 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that stuff doesn't go away for billions of years. It floats around pulsing energy every second looking for a victim. Of any species will do. To prevent rolling blackouts like the one they seen in Texas. So, because Texas screwed up, unless we get nuclear everywhere, that's the only way we can solve it, is it? Is that right? Because I keep hearing this. Whoever wrote that is just a despicable creature. They're obviously not human. Humans don't write stuff like that. Despite overwhelming evidence, nuclear power is safe and clean. Nuclear is the dirtiest thing that human ever created. I don't want to go do it, but I might have to do it. Calling nuclear clean is just... Because there's so many facets to nuclear. On top of that, it takes so long for me to tell the story. I'm going to have to go find that person who wrote that and give him a black eye. Because I got to go do a bunch of work all the time. Every time somebody writes those lies, I got to counter it. Which means... Welcome to my nightmare. Let's try it, I suppose. Carbon-free, clean nuclear, eh? Okay. This guy was the shoe bomber. That one.
Or you could ask someone who actually works with ionizing radiation and uses that knowledge to keep his own arse safe.
He's a despicable, disgusting parasite, this guy. My God, he's truly a monster. He's going to be out there telling you man-made radiation is like walking in sunshine. It's like bananas and potato chips. And he doesn't take his Geiger counter and do this, of course. He doesn't acknowledge 30-odd years of dumping it in the ocean, of course, as if that doesn't mean nothing. He doesn't go down to the graveyards and tell the victims they're fear-mongering for some reason. He doesn't go down there with his Geiger counter, or here with his Geiger counter, or there with his Geiger counter, or there with his Geiger counter, or there. He doesn't go to the graveyard and visit these people wearing paper suits who would have died that day, spraying reagents. He doesn't acknowledge what uranium mines actually take to create the uranium before it's turned into fuel. To go into fuel, that whole process mitigates any benefits nuclear might ever have had. First off, because it pollutes the water in every community forever. Second off, all of these mines have ponds. Well, they're not actually ponds, they're chemicals, and that's evaporated into the environment all day, every day. They fill these ponds up every 4 or 5 days, basically. They have 15,000 abandoned uranium mines in the nuclear wastelands. They used, all of these little dots are communities that were used as human shields. The dots are actually missile silo sites. At one point they had 55,000 communities as human shields. So if Russia or China attacks one of these silo sites, which is a community, do you think the media is going to come out and say they attacked the silo site or they attacked the community? It'll come out later that it was a missile silo site was using the community as a human shield. People in the nuclear industry are one thing you can count on. If you got them for friends or neighbors or loved ones or relatives, they're going to stab you in the back on a regular basis. That's what they do. That's who they are. That's why they got the job. Trying to call nuclear power plants emissions carbon-free or no emissions or whatever is absurdness. The people that do that, I almost said it. I get pretty cranky sometimes. 3 million children require treatment because of Chernobyl. Many will die prematurely. So Chernobyl was around 9 tons. Fukushima's, each reactors were 720 tons. If you own this shop that's abandoned, would you call nuclear emission-free or anything else. Hundreds of thousands of people know it's not. Do you think this is nuclear scientists they're picking up to go to Fukushima? Or do you think it's the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants that don't speak the language? Because I want to know. When you call that carbon-free or emission-free, go down there and tell us how wonderful shoot a video stood up right there telling us how wonderful nuclear is. If your coal plant, gas plant, oil plant breaks down, you're going to be running away and leaving your communities behind, your homes behind, your pictures, your graveyards behind, your animals, your pets behind. So, as of this afternoon, it was 100,000. By the night, apparently, it's 450,000 or 500,000. I'll have that story hopefully for Sunday. Nuclear engineering. Nuclear power, yes, please. Nuclear Engineering International, they're a joint pro-nuclear lobbying group. We cover them. Every single day we'll cover a few stories from Nuclear Engineering, World Nuclear News. They'll never put their names on the stories. The first thing you're going to notice about this lot. And second off, they're professional lawyers. They're incredibly despicable, disgusting lawyers. They're hideously revolting lawyers, yeah. Facing a looming energy crisis, Germany is still pressing ahead with its policy of phasing out nuclear power. It's time for a rethink. I see Dale P is in the comments section. Dale, don't go driving the people in my comments section insane or driving them away. I barely got anybody watching my videos as it is, okay? I work like a dog all day, every day. I work like a dog every day, man, to try to build up an audience. And I can't even go out and do research expeditions, for God's sakes, because we can't raise enough money. We're struggling, fighting for the entire planet. And I know it's frustrating, because I'm here every day fighting, okay? I know it's frustrating. But you can't come in and fight with everybody. You can't do that to me. I don't come to your house and shit on you. Given the urgency of climate change challenge. Because last night you come in, you fought with as many people as you could. All you done is hurt me. Why do that, man? I didn't create my sites for people to come in and shit on everybody here, okay? So you get a salacious headline. Ukraine city shelled, including one near a nuclear plant. So, like, when you're shelling a community with a nuclear plant in it, if you blow out the power supply, you don't have power to start up the emergency generators either at that stage. And so the plant can really melt down in a short period of time. And so what Russia's doing is just stupid. It's stupid on a whole different scale. And the fact that they're at a war and they didn't shut down these disease factories, Zelensky should be arrested and tried for crimes against humanity in the first place. Why would you keep a nuclear power plant open in a war zone? Why would you do that? It's stupid. Nuclear power production curtailed in France again. And they just found an emaciated beluga whale in the river Rhine, I think it was. In France, they're cold water animals, right? They're Atlantic Ocean animals. But they're not supposed to be way up in these hot rivers. That's the wrong place for them. And why is it emaciated up there on top of that? I didn't say if I said everybody, I apologize. You still come in and fighting with people when they're here supporting me. It's indefensible. Outrageous fanatical claims over nuclear energy. Nuclear power is not a climate solution. All the nuclear on the planet, at best, would mitigate 2 or 3% of global emissions. But it doesn't. It's the biggest, dirtiest emissioner on the bloody planet. All the fuel poles are hemorrhaging emissions into the environment that are pulsing energy every second for millions of years. Trying to claim that nuclear can mitigate climate change is like saying if you put a beer bottle up your arse, your gas will get better mileage in your car. It's ludicrous. Current nuclear plants would only avoid at most 2 to 3% of the global emissions, and the contributions seem to decrease further by 2040. In contrast, the United Nations, also known as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, aka United Nations Military-Industrial Complex, aka the New World Order, according to George Bush Sr., the world's foremost authority on climate science. I guess your name is Inquirer.net. Why should I be surprised? The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, these people wear many pins on many of these organizations. These are the industry cranks. They're there to cut your throat. They're not here for good reasons. Wind and solar can potentially deliver over 33% total emissions according to those scumbags. And they're way more than that. And it will, of course, in the next 5 and 6 years. Nuclear will not give us any energy security. Yeah, ask French how much energy security nuclear is giving them again. There's only 4 countries in the world that manufacture nuclear fuel. Sellafield just closed down, sure. And nuclear power will not lower electricity prices for consumers. It's the most expensive way to produce electricity. And among all types of power, it's the most expensive to build and maintain. As the International Energy Association found in 2020, renewable, particularly solar, were the world's cheapest energy sources. Oops. It's always that way with me. Way down. Get back on track here. I clicked instead of clicked. Don't worry. Past that. And there. It's the most expensive to build and maintain. Nuclear is a sunset industry and has been in a global decline longer than coal. It is unfortunate and outrageous how the industry continues to find willing proponents in the Philippines who put fantastical claims over fact at the expenses of the climate actions and human safety. The era of nuclear power is long gone. The Philippine government should disassociate itself from all the false nuclear myths and carve out a safer, better path for renewables. Sellafield tie-in connection contract for Sato Nuclear. We covered this before, right? The new facility at Sellafield Nuclear Site, this is because it has all the nuclear fuel at Sellafield is just incredible toxic stuff. And they have a massive amount of it. It's the repository for United Kingdom. And they use a lot of water with this stuff. And they got this company which is kind of like a filtration system for all the water influence treatment streams they got there. And they're claiming they're going to filter the water before they dump it in the ocean. You can't filter the water to the point where it's safe. You can't do it. But United Kingdom spent 30 years dumping fuel rods in the ocean, reactor cores in the ocean. It has 19 submarines down there tied up. It has never tried to decommission a single one. It has the Degenerate reprocessing facility that they figure will be at least 315 years before they'll have that fairly cleaned up. But who's going to be around in 315 years to see if that's true? And then the emissions from that place are constant. It's a horrific industry. It's such a stupid industry. It's such a selfish industry. They're going to destroy all the species with the emissions and just keep regurgitating the same lies they've been using for about 80 years now. Removes radioactivity from various multiple site streams on the Sellafield nuclear wasteland, which is surrounded by farms. So evil, man. Such an evil, despicable, revolting industry. Nuclear really doesn't have any redeeming qualities whatsoever. Nothing. It's referred to as the kidney of the site. SIXEP does vital work to clean liquid influences before it's discharged to the ocean. They're talking about radioactive concoctions is what they're basically, not water, but concoctions. Incredibly toxic dioxins and dioxides and everything else, and radiation. The treatment capabilities currently provided by the plant is needed until about 2060, another 38 years. So they're planning on making a lot of nuclear waste for another 38 years at this place, which is closed, right? Allegedly. Filtering out the nuclear material before being discharged into the ocean. It's the worst. Like, see, because Sellafield is releasing 8 million liters directly into the ocean every day from a meltdown in 1957. Filtering out nuclear material before being safely discharged. Now is not the time for South Korea to go nuke-tart. Polls show that the South Korean nuke-tarts increasingly favor about bringing U.S. tactical nuclear weapons back to Korea. and developing an indigenous nuclear weapons capability. Senior officials privately expressed concern about the U.S. commitment to defend South Korea. Deployment of U.S. Nuclear weapons in South Korea lack military merit. So, if South Korea does nuclear weapons testing of like their missiles or something like that to see if those engines work, that's provocative. Every media on the planet will attack North Korea if they do it, right? But if America's doing it, they delay the missile right now because they're worried China is going to take offense to it. America's doing military tests all the time for nuclear ballistic missiles. Alan Best, nuclear energy has obstacles too. Nuclear reactor might be a nice addition to the economy of Craig, the community in northwestern Colorado, but can't Colorado afford nuclear power? Nobody can afford nuclear power. It's a death to your country when you bring it in and for the rest of the country's existence. Utility said they figured out how to achieve 85%, possibly 90% of electricity from renewables without risking reliability and raising rates extravagantly. Nobody's yet has the answer for the last 10 or 15%. Nuclear could help. Like, really? Really? Nuclear is... It's a parasite. It's a very dangerous and disgusting and despicable one too. Every facet of the industry is predicated upon deceptions, and deceit, and dishonesty, and misrepresentation. Oh yeah, did I mention deceit? Someone testified at the meeting, cited environmental concerns. See, the problem with nuclear waste is it's still splitting the atom. That's not a problem. That's a catastrophic event. That's a snowstorm all day, every day of radioactive emissions. And they've been hiding that from you. Nobody's ever acknowledged that to you, have they? The radiation, the fuel pools are still splitting the atom. They said they're going to put the fuel in the pool to keep it cool, to help cool it. What does that mean? Well, why is it hot? It's hot because it's splitting atoms. When you hear nuclear and hot, it's what they're not saying is it's splitting the atoms. So 2 million atoms can fit on the head of a needle, but you can't perceive it or see it. But if you distribute that out, that's 2 million people ultimately can get sick, up to 1,800 illnesses in increments down the road from being infested by this biological weapon known as nuclear. Your body attacks it if it's in your body for the rest of your life with white blood cells. It tries to build a tumor around it. But what that means is you have a lack of red blood cells, because that's what white blood cells do. Every white blood cell displaces a red blood cell. The red blood cell carries nutrition and oxygen. The white blood cell doesn't. You get enough white blood cells, they call it leukemia. But when you displace a lot of red blood cells, then your immune system is compromised. You're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that are normally harmless and benign and innocuous, right? More than 19% of U.S. emission-free electricity. Like, you can't call it emission-free. So, like, the argument they got for nuclear, it's so weak. It's like you get pulled over for speeding, and the police say, why are you speeding? And you say, my foot was pushing down on the gas, and it makes the car go faster. And the cop's going to say, yeah, okay, well, that makes sense. You have a nice day. Or is he going to give you a ticket? Because that's what the industry is doing to you. Nuclear has a nagging problem. It's a piece of shit. Oh, and it's expensive. The cost of Georgia plant Vogtle, the only U.S. nuclear plant under construction, ballooned from $14 billion to $30 billion, and expected to be decade over past his schedule. The list is so long, it's disgusting. So I think the technologies will have to prove themselves, the small modular reactors. Right now, best case scenario, it'll give you $60, $70 per megawatt. Wind and solar comes in at $20, less than a third. The sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't always blow, and we have very little long-term storage. You can have pond batteries, 2 ponds. When you got extra energy, pump water up to the top one. 2 dams. You put up the dams, pump the water in, and away you go. Or you can press their storage. But there's all kinds of other storages showing up and that are applicable to large cities. Bruce Power nuclear power suppliers donate. This was Bruce Power here in Canada. Disgusting, despicable, hateful Bruce Power, whose emissions probably made her sick, no doubt, in the first place. India has streets of children down there that are double heads and are deformed. They dump their nuclear waste into the rivers for decades. The same rivers they're drinking out of. And he says India has better safety compared to many countries for nuclear. And the laws here are shocking. Standard operating procedures in place ensure there's no emergency situation at the country's nuclear plants. Well, they arrested 10,000 people, charged them with sedition for protesting a nuclear plant after Fukushima, right? None of them have been finished with the courts yet. They've dragged every one of them through the court multiple times a year for over a decade. They can't get bank accounts, they can't go to school, they can't leave their communities to go get a job. The nuclear industry is just... The definition of evil is the nuclear industry. We got a fun little poll tonight. Should it be illegal for the degenerate nuclear industry to have children? It should be, 100%, unequivocal. There's zero reason they should be allowed to have children. Zero. Because all they're going to do is put their children in the universities to take over their jobs when they retire. And they're going to get inbreeding with the other nuclears, and they're going to have children, and some of them are going to be destroyed, are going to be the ones who poisoned your children. The safeguards are so much in place there's hardly any risk of emergency, said the kooky weirdo. The emergency exercise does once a year at the site of the plant, once or 2 years outside as well as within the plant. Adding insurance. They have insurance in case of emergencies, so it's okay, we'll throw some money around and everybody can go back to sleep. All precautions are taken to ensure there is no health hazards. The fuel pools are a fuel pool. Their fuel pool is hemorrhaging into the environment the same as any other fuel pool on the planet. Their fuel pools are still splitting the atoms, massive hemorrhaging all day into the environment of isotopes. We are sufficiently placed at a distance where we don't have factors interfering or causing an emergency. If you're isolated, then it's easy to cut your external power supply. And without that, you can't even start your generators. You're wrong in every facet of it. That's what the nuclear industry does. They find somebody extremely revolting, and they're the spokesperson. Well, they're the professional lawyers. They don't actually have spokespersons. They have professional lawyers. The ministry also told the members that it is the government's responsibility to clear misconceptions and myths about the nuclear plants leading to more diseases. That's an incredible statement. That's like saying you have no right to have a conversation is what they're saying. They're saying that only their narrative is the only narrative, period. All their fuel pools and all their nuclear waste are still splitting the atoms, which means it's hemorrhaging radiation, invisible plumes of radiation all day, every day, coming out of these facilities. And I mean plumes, massive airborne plumes. Any farms within 100 miles are going to be incredibly polluted. And the people that eat it ultimately will get sick because of it. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases associated with radiation. Notice they censored my video last night. It stopped today for about 7 hours at around 200 views. Just seized up. It has been established those who work in nuclear plants are not subject to a higher risk of radiation, and there is not even a single case of radiation-related death in the vicinity of a nuclear plant. These are absurdness. This is absurdness to suggest that. It's a despicable, revolting industry. It's just, my goodness. They don't even have to work to be monsters. They're just natural at it. Once a monster, always a monster. That's why they shouldn't be allowed to have kids, see? Now, Thailand has been just saturated with Fukushima food. I won't eat from Thailand. I won't eat from Great Britain. I won't eat from any country that imports from Japan, including Canada. Establish a framework. You have to check everything. And you can't escape it, but you can mitigate some of it. Like a bag of rice from Japan, you don't want that in your house, let alone consuming it. It's absurd, right? It's just heartbreaking. It's terrifying. I'm here every night because I'm terrified, not because it's easy. There's nothing easy what I'm doing. There's zero. Zilch. Zilt. Nothing I do is easy. Everything is a struggle. That's okay. Whatever. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to come and do what I'm doing. I am. How could I not, really? How can I, like, taking a day off is just unthinkable to me. The industry is too dangerous, and that's heartbreaking. Treatment of nuclear test veterans was a criminal cover-up on an industrial scale. I think I've actually used that sentence quite a few times. 70-odd years of pretending that the soldiers who were at ground zero didn't get irradiated, despite the fact it's blatantly obvious they were radioactive. And administrations after administrations after administrations after administrations have refused to acknowledge that they're victims. That alone, right, warrants getting rid of nuclear. The fact that they're that evil, that they're that unwilling, that they're that incapable of having a conversation. Generation after generation after generations of them refuse to acknowledge it. You really think that that they never got irradiated? Is there anybody on the planet that actually thinks that the soldiers who sat there with their fist in the eye when the bombs go off and blows past them and then comes back over them again and then does it again, didn't have... I don't want to lose my water. Wasn't that a heat wave? We got a heat wave down here. No ice water, no survival down here. We actually got the fan running again tonight. Supposed to be, will feel like 34 degrees Celsius tomorrow. And we got no spiders in the forest down here whatsoever, none. They're on our houses and our vehicles, but they're not in your trees or bushes or in the woods. Because it sucked up so much radiation, they can't live there. It's the longest standing and arguably the worst. Given that it's the 70th anniversary of the first test, you forgive some of those affected for feeling totally abandoned by the country they so loyally served overseas. Indeed, right? The British took the test veterans to Christmas Island, over to Australia, also to Montebello, over to America for the nuclear test too. And used them as guinea pigs, eh? The interfusion projects gets power supply equipment delivered from their best friend, Russia. They won't take their oil or gas, but they'll take their fusion equipment. And their oil and gas because they need that for the big facility. It doesn't run on its own. 14 trailers. Big exchange of iodine pills for nuclear emergency takes place in Slovakia in August. Everyone living near the nuke plant is going to get their useless pills, including the refugees. Look at this. Farmlands right up to the nuke plant. We all live in a radioactive nuclear wasteland. Radioactive nuclear wasteland. Some people are trying to figure out what. Now, I don't ever hum songs. Last night I did, but the song I was humming was because I had watched No Nukes, which was a benefit concert in the 70s by a bunch of major artists. And the song I was singing was The River by Bruce Springsteen. And I apologize, I wasn't singing it because I can't sing. We went down by the river. And so that was the first time he'd done this song, was at that concert. And unfortunately, I had it stuck in my head. But people thought it was another artist. It was not. And I don't even like Bruce Springsteen. But that was the original unveiling of the song. And it was at the No Nukes concert. And I work on nuclear all day long, all night long, right? I listen to nuclear lectures, nuclear presentations, nuclear historical videos, and then I read just absurd amount on this subject. That makes me happy. Learning how to defeat evil should make anybody happy. Fresh, useless iodine pills. Now, iodine pills we're talking about, you take it, you got to take it about 24 hours before an accident. And in Fukushima, when it melted down, they raised the limit for iodine pills by 75 times. It's the definition of evil. That's the problem with nuclear. Every facet of nuclear is the definition of evil. Every country that has any kind of nuclear event, the industry comes out and does the worst possible response. And the response is always to protect the nuclear industry, not the victims. In every circumstance throughout 80 years, we've seen this repeat of this disconnect. And it's a blatant disconnect. They're blatant about they despise you. They have nothing but contempt for you. And it's extremely evident when they have an event their contempt. So the iodine pill theoretically saturates your thyroid gland and your pituitary glands. Because they get... Now, after Fukushima, we've seen, say, 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129. Now, that's a low emitter, but it's got a 150 million year half-life. And the problem with it is that it saturates the glands of the insects and the birds and the animals and mammals and everything else, humans and everybody else. And so you take that man-made anthropogenic iodines and your body starts making radioactive hormones with it because your body treats it as if it's a normal element. It's a very deceptive element. Your body doesn't recognize it, doesn't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So it starts turning into radioactive hormones. But what they're claiming is they're going to give it iodine pills. Don't take them till we tell you to, which is going to be too late. You got to take it 24 hours before you have a nuclear meltdown. So, which means that if you do take it, it's going to be too late. And it's not going to stop the radiation from flooding into your body or something like that. It's not like a shield. It's just meant to saturate your thyroid and stop it from absorbing an excessive amount immediately. It's not even a temporary solution. It's a fabled solution. The solution is you run away. If you're taking an iodine pill, it means it's too late. You're in the nuclear wasteland. And you're going to be sequestering all kinds of it in your bodies immediately. It doesn't protect you from binding radioactive matter. That's an absurd suggestion. Including children. Kindergarten, elementary schools, secondary schools, universities. Children aged 1 month to 3 years is half a tablet. This iodine can hurt you, by the way. So newborns and children under 1 month, a quarter of a tablet. This is absurdness, folks. To give a newborn a huge dose of iodine like this. Pregnant women of any age, 2 tablets. Your unborn child is protected by the dose. It's not protected by the dose. The uranium, plutonium, americium, neptuniums, strontiums, blah, 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 are going to sequester in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. So is the iodine. Cesium will sequester in your thyroid glands, too, for starters. Not just iodine. Gamma will, any gammas. Turning nuclear waste into art. My goodness. And even worse, inspired by the cleanup efforts at Washington Hanford Nuclear Plant. He's inspired, are you? Why don't you go down to the graveyards where they got one graveyard there with over 700 children with deformed skulls. See how much that impresses you. It's 585-mile nuclear wasteland, and he's inspired by the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society that are there cleaning it up, are you? Instead of universities and academics and nuclear companies and corporations. Because they're not going there. St. Mary's Hospital unveils new nuclear medicine machine. And so if they put a lead belt on you, these machines will automatically calibrate to shoot through the belt, which means you're going to get the worst dose imaginable. And they've been using the belts for decades and decades and decades. The world's first nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Nautilus, had a $36 million refit, and it's going to suck in tourists. It's an absolute crime, eh? These are misery machines. You can't go using misery machines for tourists. Tony Pass, an MP, has issued his support for disease factories. known as nuclear power plants. They call them mission-free. He should feed his kids the food from the farms around these places for a couple of weeks, and then in a few years' time tell me how much that worked for him. It's high time we had an informed debate on its benefits. Yes, it is. Don't forget to include someone like me for a change. If you put me in a live debate with any of these people, any nuclear scientist, nuclear physicist, nuclear academic on the planet, guess who's going to win? It ain't the nuclear industry, and I ain't going to be the apologist that I'm sitting there with. Led by the Shadow Minister for Climate Change. Shadow Minister. That's their creepiest name imaginable. That's creepy on a whole different level, man. The very real concern is the exit of coal will leave us captive to higher prices. Yeah, they drove the prices of coal up, right, with inflation and gas and oil, so that only nuclear looks good. That was done on purpose, to assure to you. Byron Donalds offers a resolution for the U.S. to expand domestic nuclear energy production. He used to work with like Rod Adams on a nuclear sub. Oh, Bilge Rat. He got a dozen co-sponsors. Big surprise. Nuclear's got like 7,000 lobbyists, for God's sakes. 7,000 emails, 7,000 telephone calls, 7,000 texts, 7,000 people knocking on your door to get your vote. Claiming nuclear creates less pollution? If it was a crime to law, you can't, all these people, you'd need to build 1,000 jails for these people. The benefits are nuclear. There's 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries from radiation poisoning. There's zero benefits. You do realize that Spider-Man and the Hulk are not real? As an engineer who worked for the military-industrial complex, a disease factory, you should know better. And you do. But you worked for it, and now you're just another useful idiot. No longer a person, now you're just a useful idiot. French regulators issue fresh notice for reactor pit measures at Buggy. This is a nuclear site. That's what it actually looks like. Here's the picture they showed you. And when you blow it up, it actually looks like, you can see all the farms in the background. It's disgusting, eh? But if you look up pictures of this site, look at the farms. That freaks me out every time I sees it. It freaks me out. How many people got sick and died from eating that stuff? In particular, prescribes the implementation of technical devices to keep the reactor pit dry. They're talking about to spread the curium. You want a curium, that's some nuclear meltdown, on the bottom of the reactor pit, an adjacent room, and passive flooding of the curium by water, aimed at preventing the foundation slab from being breached in the event of a core meltdown. It doesn't work. It'll burn right through it. It's 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. It'll atomize an aerosol, ionize and radiate it, and release it into the environment as a massive airborne plume. UK Hinkley Point. So they show you that picture of Hinkley Point, but that's actually Hinkley Point. It's dressed up because they're putting Hinkley Point cedar, right? Or maybe. It's surrounded by farms as far as you can see. There's one great big disease factories. As we know it, everything we know so far about the nuclear zombies. I knew that was coming. I probably said it a few times, but I knew it was coming. Nuclear zombie apocalypse movie. Just yay. Can never be enough zombies in the world. We're getting another zombie project called As We Know It. It's Hollywood, so what can I say? The independent horror film takes place during the nuclear zombie apocalypse. Let's hope it's something that demonizes nuclear. I'm all for it, man. Just demonize nuclear and you got a friend in me. Another nuclear weapon convoy on the M6. These lorries are lined with lead shields to try to protect the driver and the people on the highway. But they should do it late at night when there's nothing else on the highway, because if you drive past it, you're getting blasted. That's a fact. And you can't even use the nuclear weapon on top of that. You don't need it, you just pretend you got it. It comes less than a month after a previous convoy, which we covered, of course, escorted by police who are not wearing lead-lined chutes to protect themselves. We do not need nuclear missiles. Well said. Job well done. Pop art gallery inspired by nuclear weapons. Blackpool Comic Con artists. Pop art gallery inspired by nuclear weapons. They're crazies, eh? Includes depictions of nuclear weapons. Even children's toys that were influenced by the detonation of the first nuclear weapon. Children's toys that were inspired by nuclear detonations. And kids used to have toy atomic ray guns. You used to get the atomic ring from the Cracker Jack boxes. B-2A stealth bombers, U.S. test nuclear bomber. But if North Korea does any kind of nuclear missile testing, the whole world comes out and freaks out. These are the stupidest planes imaginable on top of that. You got any, like they burned about, because I can't remember what the numbers was. Was it 1 million cars? The same as 1 million cars in 24 hours or something? U.S. Air Force tested a nuclear bomb with a jammed GPS. It doesn't matter. You can't use it, stupid. Rolls-Royce is claiming they're going to have a small modular reactor in 2 years' time for the U.S. Department of Defense. This is something we've heard probably 8 or 9 times in the last decade. It's not going to be what the definition of a small modular reactor will be, though, I betcha. It'll be the complete opposite. Despite what they're going to claim, it'll be the complete opposite. Well, there you have it. We made it. We made it before the Geiger counter went to sleep. That's pretty good. Now, that's the 24-hour cycle of lies we just went through. It's been a long, hard week, isn't it? It's been a brutal week. A lot of nasty stories we covered this week, my goodness. So how did we do on the poll tonight? Don't matter. We got 47 votes, 85% said the pro-nuclear shouldn't be able to have kids. You gotta love it, man. You gotta love it. That pisses the pro-nuclear off tonight. No, they shouldn't have kids because their kids will work in the nuclear industry and they're going to be even worse than the scumbags that are already there. Right? That was awesome, folks. Thank you. That was wicked. Woo! Let's get some music up and rolling. That's not it. It's close, but it's not the go-to. We need something calming. Good night, everybody. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. A great weekend. I got a lot going on, and I got to be into the doctor on the first part of next week. And we're hitting the DCA hard, and I'm supposed to be in to get a CAT scan on Monday because we can't. Nuclear industry has destroyed everything. And Tabitha, you're welcome. Albert, hi Albert. Port Angeles, Don Vincent, Dana Nasana. Good night, everybody. James Lucid, hi James. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Annie, Archie. Kevin Blanche will be at the Enola Gale hangar on the 6th. As he does every year, I think. So we'll do Hiroshima on Sunday. And we'll do Nagasaki on the 9th on the anniversary, I guess. Thinker, good night, everybody. Philipon, Dale P, Barks and Meows, I know Colette is out there somewhere. Swanee D is out there tomorrow. Obsolete Optics. Peaceware, Darrell Murray, Nancy Sands, Joe, the Invisible Rabbit. That's it, I guess, is it? Just a quick shout out for everybody in the comments section, so. Let's end the poll. 49 votes, 86% said it should be illegal for the degenerate scum pro-nuclear to have kids. Oh, that makes me feel better tonight. That's a great way to end the week. Hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. Thank you, everybody. Timber, Traveler. Let me go back up through the names, see if I missed anybody. Thank you, Port Angeles. Love you too. Did we get everybody? I know, folks. I'm harder on myself than my detractors, right? I hold myself to a higher standard than my detractors. I'm human, they're not. And yeah, it was a great show tonight, I thought. It was a good show for the weekend show. Well, see everybody, I guess, on Sunday night. Sunday night. We're struggling, so it is what it is. We'll see everybody on Hiroshima, right? We'll do Hiroshima this Sunday. Yeah, let's do Hiroshima anniversary, 77th anniversary. Because we really do a great job on these anniversaries of these major events. And we cover them all, 3 Mile Island, Sellafield, Windscale, Mayak. Unfortunately, it took down my other site with 1,600 presentations on it. But that's okay. Hugs for everybody, you guys and folks and wonderful people. You have a great night and a great weekend. Really, have a great night and a great weekend. I'll be back on Sunday, refreshed, ready to curb stomp the scumbag nuclear industry. Unless we have breaking news. If we have breaking news, I'll be back early. Got to keep an eye on that earthquake in Japan currently happening because of the aftershocks. And if you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. I don't really care, but it'd be cool. Take care, folks. We'll see everybody soon. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow and a great day on Saturday, and we'll see you on Sunday. Take care. Yeah, Meta World. Good night. Thank you.
Ja.